it electrifies conversation and subject matter. So I'm elated. I mean, it's been a difficult year for so many people, including myself as artists and musicians. But I always say I'm Slovak, so I'm like, I just keep going. You know, we don't stop. You know, I can't really. It's something that I love doing, and why stop?
Well, you know, we John and I can share your elation. Not quite as meaningful as what you're doing with this, but we just had ourselves an award here. We got, a couple of weeks ago from the Hollywood Digest, which named us one of the top 75 web programs in the world, which was a real kick in the pants for us. So I can understand your excitement. And this isn't the first time Red Omen has been up for an award.
No, and congratulations to you.
Thank
the
you.
Hollywood Digest. You're welcome. It's not. And as I was mentioning, it's been a tremendous journey from the 2019 release at the School of Visual Arts in New York in Manhattan, which is where we released it. And from that point on, aside from the radio play that the song has received, the video, as I mentioned, has showed at over 1,000 festivals, won multiple awards, incredible amount of acclamation. But that's really, everybody wants to pay their bills and put bread on the table. But, for me as an artist, as I said, how the art translates in some way. For me, as a dyslexic, I wrote the song. It's an anagram of my own name. How more appropriate that a dyslexic takes that on as some kind of a mission.
It is very, very clever.
And it's helped me immensely because I've met so many wonderful people, not only in the dyslexic community, but around the world because of it. And the music has connected with a lot of people. And it's bigger than me. It's true. The more that you give away, the more that comes back. And this process has been this snowball effect of, like, throw the spaghetti at the wall frivolously for 2 years with animation houses, universities, colleges, anybody that would want to take on a project, and nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, on a whim, I see this GIF, little GIF of this Easter Island Moai head, and that's sort of the emblem of Ed heads around the world. And I sent the guy an email, and the next day we're talking and scheming to, put together a storyboard. And it's just been this, like I said, I get tingles even just thinking about it because I look at it and I go, the more I gave away, the more they came back. And that's why I do what I do. I'm philanthropic in my nature as a person because that's just kind of like, it's what makes life real for me in that way. And I think it helps existence, your own personal existence.
Well, for those in our audience who aren't familiar with the Royal Star Film Festival, it's an international film festival centered in downtown Royal Oak, Michigan, at the state-of-the-art Imagine Theater, and it's planned by a nonprofit, the Royal Star Arts Institute. And John Bon Jovial, I know you're just aching to get in here. What you got?
Well, yeah, Ed, first of all, welcome. We are really, really happy that you're here. And there's a couple of things that I want to touch on. You had mentioned, the more you give away, the more you get back in return. And do you integrate that into the creation of your music for maybe selfish reasons, but knowing that people are going to love it? Have you gone out of your way to try to use that as a business model to be able to create your art and also maybe hopefully try to make a living doing it at the same time?
Oh, that's a great question, and it's big. It's a boat. Why, I think, is and there's a lot of gravity in your first part of your question because, selfishly, yes, I create out of the necessity that because I have to. Self-expression to me is like the most important thing, especially as somebody that struggled with communications as a young person. The need to be understood in the most simplest of ways. How it translates for me is through music, through ideas and things that I react on. I think every good artist or a piece of art has some reflection of societal's existence somehow in it. Herbie Hancock, if you're familiar with him, great American keyboardist.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I was turned on to Herbie through Jaco Pastorius, and as a young bass player, and a lot of young bass players, that was a big part of the development of our prowess and understanding what we wanted to be as a young player. But on the back of his record, Herbie once wrote, and it's there today, the definition of an artist is one who has the ability to fuse their life with the rhythm of the times. And as a young person, that really hit me hard. I mean, even as a teacher for 24 years teaching music, I've used that phrase so often because we define our experiences by our own experiences. We put ourselves in situations where I love this artist, I love this group, and that's great. That's so healthy. But sometimes what can happen is you can get caught in feeling like you need to be like that in some way. But and where creativity breaks new boundaries is through that process of individual self-expression. If it's homogenized in some way, it can be really clinical, and it can be kind of watered down in certain ways. And there's frameworks to everything. You know, there's repetitiousness to a lot of stuff, but it's how we decide that we're going to approach it and present it. So out of, you know, how has it become part of my model in terms of what I do? And I mean, it's crazy to say, but my method is no method. One of the hardest things that it was difficult for me as a younger independent artist was, how do we classify you? People would say, I don't know what to do with this. And just many doors closed in my face because I didn't have a homogeneous kind of sound. From album to album, tune to tune, you might get a rock number, a funk number, a country number, a spoken word number, a jazz kind of sounding piece. I love jazz music. I studied that one in college. That's so healthy. You know, to have a wider drawer of things that you can utilize. And I played all that music over the course of my life, even African music. How many weddings and ensembles and concert band I played in. Like, all of that has defined me in my own personal experience. So my strategy has been, be myself. How do I learn from the moment of not only writing but performing in the whole process? And what I mean by that is, you know, when you're a young writer, you're like, I'm going to write a tune. I'm going to sit down and write a tune, and I love this number, and you're excited about so many different things. But more recently, in the last decade of my life, and this has been some interesting confirmation and other things, like listening to Tom Waits or Keith Richards even talks about this, that the catalyst of an idea is the spark, the thing that hits the ground that makes you go, yeah, I'm really excited about what I want to say or this feeling I'm creating on my instrument. The next thing that I'm asking myself is, what is it asking of me? What is it? What is this bigger question? Like when I force my ideas through a process, it can sound constrained. It can sound typical in certain things. But when I say, well, can I say that? Can I be brave enough to say that because it's asking me that question? I will ultimately put it down. And my writing is very stream of consciousness in terms of what that is. So I edit myself and make it palatable in some way so it has some shape and form. But part of my strategy in marketing myself is just that. What has been so helpful for me is being on shows like this, to be able to express my ideas about my craft and why I do what I do, or the art form itself. I think conversation is the most important thing. Information is power. So it has helped me immensely through being able to explain my process to get to other places, because people want that. People want to hear that. I love that. I love watching podcasts and listening to shows because people are talking about their life experiences. It's not tenured in any way, right? It doesn't have the angles and boundaries to it. It's like, whoa, I wasn't expecting this. And even in the process of creating a documentary, you might, the same thing will happen. You'll be like, I'm making a documentary about apples. And you may set out to make a documentary about apples, but in the process, there's all these other things that are important to pay attention to that you may not have necessarily had expected. And usually that's where magic happens.
All right, so let me jump in here, and let's take what you've just said, which is a wealth of information. And we just played a song called Tomorrow is Today. How did you apply all this philosophy, these years of experience, this honing of talent to create Tomorrow is Today, which, by the way, I think is a really, really nice, kick-ass piece of rock and roll. I really enjoyed that. But how did you put all of that into this song?
Exactly like what I was saying. Don't worry so much about the method and go with the feeling of like I sound my barbaric yelp. You know, I pick up my bass, I start playing something out of the ordinary, and I listen to it. I listen to what it's how it's making me feel, and if I react to it the right way, there will be language that starts to approach me. And some of the language that I'm using in that song is very diametrically opposed to, like, you might be like, the first line is, I'm never going to tell you what I like, then you'll know me too well. What the heck does that mean? Right? We pump our limbic systems into the digital ether every day to the point that it's like, I know what somebody had for lunch or if their parrot's name is Jim. Right? Like, sometimes that, but, you know, is more revealing when you don't say anything at all. There are those aspects and the diametrically opposed aspects to things inside of what's going on. So I throw that into the mix and I listen to it whether or not it feels right. It's a culmination of my subconscious and what I've been thinking about, the things that I'm immediately thinking about in my day, something that I may be prognosticating as a result of my own personal feelings about it, how I feel today. All of that is just throwing it down and going, do I like the way that it feels? It's a culmination of everything happening at once.
Neil Diamond said it, I think, back in '75 on the album he did. One song said it very, very simply. Don't think, feel.
Right. It's like when you sit down and you're teaching somebody drums. Like, I mean, taught drums and bass, guitar for many years. And people are like, well, how do you develop all this limb independence? You know, you got to think like this with your kick and your... I don't think that anymore because it's like you just said. It's like you just feel it. I have this feeling. I'm going to sit down and start to perpetuate it in some way. If you start going down the road of thinking too much, you can either take too long in the process, you can become contrived, you may not ever get to where you need to.
Exactly.
And inside of the creative process, I don't say I'm just working on this idea. I've got always multiple ideas happening, and when I feel like I've connected with them right, I'll look at it again.
We've got a very special tune coming up we want to get to, and before we let you go, we want to let you have a time to go ahead and tell people how they can find you, learn about you, your website. How do they get in touch with you?
That's edroman.net, and all my social networking buttons are there. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, my YouTube channel. You can get also all the new material. It's out on iTunes, Amazon, CD Baby. You can buy physical copies sent directly to your door. You can contact me also through my management, which is MTS Management out of Pittsburgh. It's Michael Stover, and I'm excited to. Yeah, and the new single's coming out October 1st called Happiness.
And that's the one we're going to be getting to in just a couple of minutes because we are very pleased that you and Michael have let us premiere it here on the David Bowers Awards. Take your time now and tell us about this song, how it came about, how you came up with the idea.
Well, I'm an emotional person. I mean, I won't lie to you. I've cried when I've been extremely happy, and I've cried when I've been extremely sad. I think that the releasing of emotion through these processes, even laughter, can lead to crying. This expulsion is a learning process. It's the release of all this pent-up anxiety inside of you, and it's a good thing to like, we're always taught, well, we shouldn't show our emotions. You know, I come from a very staunch Eastern European background, and, you know, all the pictures and the photos of straight face. Right. But my grandmother, she was always such a loving, comedic, tell you like it is kind of a person, but wasn't afraid to be emotional. And I realized that through this anxiety release of this happiness, this new form of happiness can be found. It's crazy because the tune was really fraught. It was born out of this sort of like online argument with questioning me about this process of crying or showing elation. And I went, well, you know what? I don't care what you think. I'm going to write a tune that's all about that. And it came out in an honest and easy kind of going way. So it felt right. It felt right at this moment, and the language felt right at this moment.
And that sounds like the important combination right there. Ed, we want to thank you for coming by and sharing with us, telling us your story. I have to admit that I stumbled onto the the dyslexic connection